We did what he'd asked. We went down to the seashore, got into the boats, and set off across to the other side of the lake. As soon as we got into the boats, the crowd began to disperse. We began to relax. Too soon. The wind whipped up like it can on Galilee. In no time the waves were 15 to 20 feet high, pitching and tossing the boat. We were bailing frantically, some of us rowing as hard as we could to keep the boat headed into the wind. Suddenly, I remember it now as clear as it was yesterday, somebody stood up. Clinging on the halyards, they were peering through the rain and saying, "There's somebody out there." I shouted, "We can't help them, we'll be lucky not to drown ourselves." He said, "No, they're walking on the water." Then somebody else said they could see him, and of course there was only one explanation. "It's a ghost." You know what? Suddenly we all found that we hadn't been rowing before quite as hard as we thought. Now we really were rowing. Then we heard a voice. "It's all right. I'm here. Don't be afraid." Now here it comes, my moment of glory. I thought, I know that voice. So I stood up, clinging onto the mast, while the boat still pitched and tossed all over the place, and I shouted to him, "Lord, if it's really you, you tell me to come to you walking on the water." Then he says, "Come on then." I never expected him to say that. Even in the midst of the storm, all the other lads were nudging each other and grinning. I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking I didn't have the bottle to get out, but I did. I put my feet on the water, my behind on the gunwale of the boat. It was one of the scariest moments of my life when I pushed my backside off the gunwale and began to walk. At first, all I could see was him, just him. I was walking towards him. Then I thought, none of the others had dared to do what I was doing. I imagined myself telling people about this back in the wine cellars of Capernaum. What a story it would make. Then for the first time I noticed the waves and how big they were. It was one thing to see them in a boat, but another thing entirely to be walking among them. Quite suddenly I found myself sinking into what had been solid under my feet. Then I was under the surface of the water, clawing my way upwards, coughing, spluttering, going down again. As I came up a second time, I screamed, "Lord, save me!" You know what? He reached out and grabbed me. He pulled me out. So I stood there on the water with him. Can you imagine that? "Well, your faith didn't last long," he said. "Why did you doubt me?" Then we walked back to the boat together. I never felt so proud in all my life. I never felt quite so stupid. We got back into the boat, and the wind stopped. All the lads in the boat looked at him, awe on their faces. "You really are God's son," they said.